I personally got involved in big data when I was in the wrong side of 50s, but for me it's become an obsession, so much so that I spend as much as 20 days a month traveling, trying to build a global business for Crayon Data, the company I co-founded. Hopefully I'll share some of this excitement with you today, providing glimpses of how big data is changing us as consumers, our businesses, politics, national security, and a lot more. Before I get started, a question for a couple of people. Let me ask, what do we know about big data, or what is big data? I'm going to first ask Vikram Achanta, who typically knows most things about most things. So Vikram, do you have a view? Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. Let me get a view from Nikhil Sarup, who's a techie and again, who never feels shy of telling us what he knows. Nikhil, where are you? Nikhil is missing. Okay. He's here? Nikhil, you're too late. Let me not repeat the question. Let me get started. So, one of the things about, this is not moving. Can you help? On it. So while we kind of wait for the remote to be set right, I want to go back into a bit of history. Those of us who were around or watching the markets in the late 90s when the IT boom in India took place, the market cap of Infosys, Wipro, etc. at one point of time exceeded that of Reliance. That was the day when everyone believed that IT was where money is to be made. That point of time, you had a lot of fake IT companies coming out. I don't know whether you remember, but there were headlines about real estate firms, packaging firms, all of whom either changed their name by adding at the end Infosystems or software so that the market would reward them, or they would go and change their articles of and memorandum of association to be positioned as an IT company. So typically, when some industry is hot, you have a lot of fakes coming out in the market. You see the same thing happening today in big data. There are companies who have anything to do with any numbers or data crunching. You'll see themselves describing themselves as big data. We get a lot of candidates, and you'll see this on LinkedIn. Anyone who's got some Excel expertise will say, I know big data. So you know that this is an industry, this is kind of getting hot. Why is this happening? It's because underlying this, there's something significant that's happening. You look at what's happening here. There's a sheer volume of data that's being generated today is unmanageable. Nowhere in history have we generated so much data. Then there's variety. Once upon a time, data meant numbers. Today, data means not just numbers, it means a lot of unstructured stuff. Text, images, videos, audios, all of those constitute data, and the technology that you need to put all of them together needs to be substantially different and also cope with the volume. Also the velocity. At any point of time, the amount of data that's being generated is so huge that it's not like the good old days where at the end of each month you could say, or end of each quarter, you could say, let me now take a look at the data and generate insights. 3 months, 1 month, you're a dinosaur. Things need to happen in real time. That's the other fundamental difference. So essentially, the old ways of managing this madness won't work. You need new technologies. And so while there are many fakes in this business, there is a real underlying transformation that presents a significant opportunity. Now, why should it matter at all to all the people in this room? Because it's really a tsunami that's hitting all of us, whether you look at your lives as a consumer or the businesses that you run. We heard in the previous session that particularly in the fintech space, I heard Vinay Matthew saying that the business is about saying, can I look at the data, make predictions, take action on it? It's not just fintech. Every business, more than they recognize or admit, need to have to be able to address this phenomenon. And unless you can choose to either say ignore it, but ideally this is a wave that you should be riding. You need to go with the flow, and hopefully some of the examples I show you today will convince you that this wave really matters, that you should be riding this wave. So what I'm going to do in this session essentially is to share with you 5 examples. One from the standpoint of a startup, one from a standpoint of an established company, one from the standpoint of a bank. I'm going to take an example from politics and national security. You won't see any gyan in this session. At most, you'll see a couple of nuggets of gyan here and there. It's all about live examples. So the gyan number 1, this is the first of the 2 gyans. A simple way to imagine how you can deal with this massive amount of data that's being thrown into you is to say, let the data come in whatever shape and size. I'm going to throw it into a blender, let the blender do its job, and finally the juice that comes out is all that matters. Patterns will emerge, patterns that make sense for me as a consumer or as a business or in politics. That's the way to imagine it. Throw all the data together, the patterns will emerge. The first example, and this is interesting because look at 2 companies, more or less in the same business. One is over almost 100 years old, Hilton. The other one is less than 20 years old, the Priceline Group. Hilton, over the years, has built up enormous assets across the world. $9 billion of assets, brick and mortar, has a market cap of $23 billion. Priceline, less than 20 years old, again operates in the travel-related space, $195 million of assets, $66 billion market cap. You'll see this in industry after industry, no surprises, because that's what the internet allows you to do. But the real story is, how does a company like Priceline Group sustain this innovation and therefore value creation? What are they doing? They're using big data to harness disparate data sources. A lot of you in this room, and including the morning sessions, it won't come as a surprise that all of you do basic analytics, but typically look at the data that you analyze. You analyze your website traffic, you analyze your cost of acquisition, you look at your pipeline or funnel, and you're looking at your sales. But what you're missing out is other silos of data that you're creating. You have people leaving comments on your site. You have people leaving on social media good, bad, or ugly comments about you. There's a CRM system that you have. You may have a call center where someone's calling in. All those data sources are being captured in different silos. Now, if you were smart like what Priceline Group is, they have an ability to harness these diverse sources of data, throw it into the blender, and that tells them, this is what you must do. If Nikhil comes to my site the next time, I don't just look at his interaction in this session or what he's bought from me in the past, but I'm able to harness everything that Nikhil has said about me in social media. When he called a call center, he left a trail there, and I have the ability to pull all that together to engage him better. So fundamentally, Priceline Group has focused on customers as their asset, whereas Hilton has focused on buildings as their asset. So if you focus on customers as your asset, you get the $66 billion. But not every old company lags behind like Hilton. Here's an example of an old fogey which has stayed with the times. Cleveland Clinic is one of the top medical services companies in the United States. Some years ago, what happened? Can you go back full screen? Some years ago, they received terrible patient satisfaction ratings. Now, in that situation, what happened was, in reality, you wonder, what should I be doing? And if you look at what they did, is it? Okay. Change the slide, please. Yeah. Now, if you look at what these guys did, they looked, if you look at what makes people happy or unhappy, hospital visits are never happy visits. But as Amira spoke in the morning, if you're able to demonstrate respect, empathy for the patient and the family, it makes a big difference. I'll give you my own example. I spent several months in hospitals last year, the top places in Delhi, Medanta, Max, National Heart, because my mother was in the hospital. And I know the kind of things that either irritate you or make you happy. Just examples. Casual attitude of nurses. Your mother's admitted, but the food doesn't arrive on time. The doctor doesn't show up on time. Sometimes the place is not clean. Sometimes there's an overly commercial attitude. And great example, every 2 days I would go to the billing department and pay an advance so that you remain paid up. 2 hours later, they will call and say, sir, you need to pay up so much. But I tell them, you know what, I came and paid in the morning. They said, no, we've updated our accounts, you owe me so much more. There's no coordination between the call center and the billing department. It frustrates you. Or when you're all set to go home because you're cured and there's a 2-hour wait for discharge summary to be created and the billing to happen. All of us have faced this in one shape or form. Now, if you look at this, any hospital, there's a range of things that impact customer engagement. Now, these guys thought that waiting time for patients was the single biggest irritant causing dissatisfaction. But they use big data principles. Change the slide, please. They use the blender. Look at the number of data sources that they pulled in. They pulled in data, which is the internal data, which is very straightforward, billing data, medical records. But they also pulled in other data which is inside but unstructured, notes from the call center, patient complaints, caregiver notes, avatar surveys. They also pulled in data from outside, whatever anyone was saying in social media, for example. Government agencies that were ranking hospitals. When you put all of this in a blender, suddenly you say, you know what? It is not the waiting time that was the irritant. The pattern that emerges is that patients are looking for understanding and empathy. They come in knowing that there will be a wait time. All they want is visibility that, you know what, the doctor's late. He's going to be here in 30 minutes. Or the OT is fully packed up right now. Your operation will happen 3 hours later and not now. That lack of communication and empathy is what irritates people. That would have been missed completely if this approach had not been taken. Moving on to the next example, that was as a business. So like Priceline, many of you in this room are startups. You have no legacy issues. You can build your business by planning on this approach upfront. Or you could be an old company like Cleveland Clinic and you can wipe the slate clean and say, I'm going to do things differently. Now let's look at this from your standpoint as a consumer. If you look at you as a consumer, F&B, healthcare, fitness, and travel, these are all familiar logos and names. How many of these are apps on your phone? Many of them. You get notifications, you get spam email, you get spam SMS, and you wonder, while initially it may be enjoyable, but when you start deleting those apps because you're irritated by the amount of information that's surrounding you, that shows that as a consumer, you're inundated by information, you have too many choices around you. It's a problem of plenty. Let's go to the next slide. Let's take this, let me empathize with you. Many of you in this room are building businesses with offices across the country. Imagine You're taking a flight to Bombay or Bangalore. You take an evening flight, you land in Bombay, you reach your hotel at 7 p.m. and you're saying, okay, let me go and find a place for dinner. You're surrounded by information. You look at Zomato, hundreds of options. You do a Google search, millions of options. You put a question on Facebook for your friends, can you suggest a restaurant in Bombay? You get lots of ideas. And eventually, after 30 minutes, you get frustrated and either order room service or go down to the coffee shop and have dinner. Where did that over or surfeit of information help you? It wasn't working for you. And look at what your bank is doing. Citibank sends you messages saying 2,000 dining offers for you. ICICI says 1,700 offers for you. But you have gone finally to that hotel coffee shop or ordered room service because you just could not cope with that information. Can your bank do this differently? Yes, it can. Next slide, please. Imagine most of you have, or many of us have, a bank's mobile app because we access our bank account online. A bank, all it has to do, and imagine if you have an ICICI card and it's your main card, the bank knows that you spent a certain amount of money over the years and months. They know the kind of restaurants you've been to. If they offer you a Facebook login, they also know what your public profile says about restaurants you like or the kind of food you like. The bank should, and if your office tomorrow is in Cyber Hub and you're looking for a place for lunch, the bank should be able to say, you know what, this guy likes Japanese food. This is lunchtime in Gurgaon Cyber City. Can I give him a bunch of options from my list of 1,700 where there are deals and offers, pops up as a notification on a mobile handset? They'd make life so much easier for you. Now, this is how a bank should be doing rather than saying here are 2,000 offers or 1,700 offers. Next slide, please. The next one is in politics. 2008 and 2012 were watershed years. Obama used database marketing to win elections. What did he do? He compiled 3 data sources: official voters list, other public data about individuals, and in the US, there are hundreds of pieces of information. What car do you own, what kind of house do you have, etc. Plus interaction data. What kind of sentiment did you reveal on social media? Put all that together, what it allows the Obama campaign to do is to say, can I ensure that people who are loyal to me actually come out and vote? Can I ensure that those who are fence sitters, I can convert them by either calling them or knocking at their doors? Can I find lookalikes of my loyal voters? They also use this for raising money. That was the turning point. Hillary will probably use the same approach, while Trump will only continue tweeting. Now, those of you who live in Delhi would have seen glimpses of this, whether thought out or not, in the AAP campaign for Delhi Assembly elections. In the area that I live, that polling booth has about 1,500 voters. These guys used to go home to home collecting money, donations, 1,000 rupees, 500 rupees. So on the voters list, they would tick off households and say 100 rupees, 50 rupees, 1,000 rupees. Before the elections, they could actually say, this neighborhood, I'm going to carry with me. Why? Because out of 1,500, 800 people have contributed money. Contributing money is the single biggest commitment you can make to a party. Now, none of the parties in India have taken a structured approach to saying, can I pull all data together and do database marketing? So, here's an example which makes you wonder where the big data failed. Nandan was the tech guru, but he lost to Anand Kumar. Was it a failure of big data, or was it the Modi way of being more powerful? You can make a case either which way, but the point is, while Nandan and team put together tech infrastructure, I don't think it did enough of the kind that Obama campaign did. But I think it's come here to stay, and we will see over the years that even in India, as technologies become available, we'll do a lot more in this front. Next slide. The last illustration is national security. After 26/11 in Mumbai, P. Chidambaram was an advocate of saying, we'll create NatGrid. After Chidambaram moved out of Home Ministry, it became orphaned. Hopefully now Modi has focused on it, recent CEO of NatGrid, and hopefully we will get to a situation where they're saying, I'm going to pull together data from 21 sources, banks, credit cards, visa and immigration records, air and train travel, data from intelligence agencies to help identify potential terrorists or terrorist activities. Granted forever, and tech and big data has to play a big role in countering terror, which otherwise resorts to asymmetric warfare. So my final gyan, next slide, is some basic principles of big data. Don't tax your brain about saying why something happened. Throw the data together, let the algos do their job, and point you in the right direction. It's always good to pump in as much data as possible. It will never be a certainty. What it gives you is a confidence level. What is the percentage probability that if I call this voter, he will vote for me? What is the percentage probability that there's likely to be a terror attack in Mumbai in late 2016? But those probabilities, if they're high, you know you can take preventive action. So that's basically it. Now, I started initially by saying that one of the reasons why big data is hot, or indicators that big data is hot, is the number of fakes. I'm going to give you one last indicator, and again, that kind of conveys the story. Look at Times of India of July 24th. Times of India is also saying big data is changing sex lives around the world. I knew Nikhil would be very happy. So that's essentially my message here, that there's something significant happening, whether it's in business or our lives as consumers or politics as national security, and this is a train that you got to ride. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yes, ma'am, do you want to go up, and we'll have a mic come out to you very quickly. The lady out there in black. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mayuri, and I've worked with data for past 3 years. So I've worked with American companies as well as Indian companies, and I feel that the way we collect data and structure data in our systems is a big problem, because we have a very strong pool of talents who can analyze data and can really adopt to new technologies. But the point is, we have so much of dirt in that data to really pick up the signal is very difficult. Of course, the fact that most of us are working on structured data and we are not thinking of integrating all of it. But the fact is, even since I've worked with Indian banks, you would be surprised to know the way they maintain profiles and transaction data. It is absolutely unclean. So do you think that we have to make some progress on the way we evolve the collection of data, maintaining of data, and structuring of data also, because we fall really behind in terms of that?
So the good news is that we work with banks across the globe, and tier 1 banks in US are no different or no better than banks in India. Data is as dirty. The cleaning, you can't get away from it. I'll give you an example. The same bank in 2 different fields will write Starbucks as STARBUCKS. Somewhere else they've abbreviated to STARBX, for example. So it's the same everywhere. What's different between the first world, the West and India, is the number of data sources. In the US, about you or about me, the amount of data in public, your tax records, your credit history is all publicly available. You can buy it through brokers, and therefore you're not limited by the number of sources. To me, that's the fundamental difference. But the Indian government is making a lot of data publicly available through APIs, etc. So I think so that's a step in the right direction. But remember, you don't want to be where the US is, where anything is available publicly. You have to strike a balance between availability of data and privacy. And therefore, I would not be too worried about it or lose too much sleep that we're lagging behind.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, given that most of us are founders here, but typically early stage, some more evolved, it's a nightmare to actually start collecting data, properly, apart from just, even Google Analytics. It's not the easiest thing to set up when you're just starting out. Do you have any suggestions as to how and what one can do to make sure you're actually collecting all the data, even if you start making sense of it at a later date? How do you start collecting data sort of day one?
See, at the end of the day, if you're a startup, I would continue to believe that you're in a better position to set up the foundation upfront. It's far harder to do if you're a 20-year-old company with set systems and processes. It's a burning train, you can't jump off it. In your case, it's a new train, a new coach on a new track. I think you can start by doing simple stuff. You spoke about Google Analytics, that's fine, that's for your online data. But then you have your transaction data, which is easy to do. You may have your social media data. You may have people who may have called in to complain about your product. You may have got testimonials from some people. I think it's more about making the effort and not being lazy. It's far easy to do when you're small and you're dealing with, let's say, 300 transactions a month as opposed to 3 million transactions a month. It just requires a certain amount of focus. I don't think it's hard at this stage. Yeah.
You quoted an example of Barack Obama and his election campaign. Country the size of India and as diverse as India is not used to giving sweeping mandates, last election being an exception. So how do you use big data to unleash election campaigns in a country like India?
So because politics in India is fragmented because of multiple parties, regional parties or what have you, I would make the case that using data to target individually is far more important in India because it's not such a homogeneous market. You spend a ton of money when you use mass media advertising. But to me, if you look at today, Indian political parties are extremely savvy when it comes to using social media. And I think you can certainly move in that direction. Fortunately, our voter records have been available publicly for a long, long time. Whereas a market like US, it's only after that famous 2000 election when they couldn't find voting, when Al Gore lost to George Bush. Till then, they did not have nationally documented voting records. In India, you have that. In India, I think it's eminently possible to do it. And I would make the point that it's even more important in India because there is a large segment of voters in India who remain undecided till the end. And particularly to get those fence sitters across, I think this can play a big role. I think the amount of money that people like AAP have raised through entirely individual contributions, that to me is also an initial indicator that talking to consumers as voters as individuals can certainly make a difference. So I would be an optimist in this regard. Rather than say no, it can't work, start with a few small experiments and I think we will head in the right direction. It's not easy work, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, Ujjwal Chaudhary, I'm media academic. Yeah, my question is that when this whole discussion on unique identification number, Aadhaar card was going on, there was this big criticism of privacy and security of big data. From Nazi Germany to communal Indian riots, there have been the misuse of social data for targeting communities or people or families or whatever. What do you suggest on privacy, protection and security of big data, particularly in national and political context?
Sure. So I think you're right. There has to be a balance. I would make the case that when it comes to national security, for example, it's a question of survival of our country and us as a people, right? And therefore in those situations, I would want to use the data when the guys who are striking terror are coming in hidden, they're coming in, you don't know who they are. Data can provide a possible way to fight back asymmetric warfare. I would certainly want to do it. To do it beyond that, in politics or anywhere else, you're right, we need to draw a line, which means it calls for a regulator. A strong regulator who lays down the ground rules, is able to punish violators, that is the answer. So rather than a yes or no, I would say yes within boundaries and with a regulator coming in.